Charles, please.
If you can empower the administration from the bottom, the provincial council, the local councils are still with the centre. Is it going to be completely under provincial council?
Yeah, of course.
And
Second.
if that is so, what are the further powers that can be devolved to the local councils?
No, I was thinking of the provincial local authorities have to be under the provincial authorities. I had no question about it. And we must stop this centre dealing directly with the local authorities. No, but I am saying they need, surely local authorities cannot be given legislative power. But some of the functions of the provincial councils can easily be performed by local authorities. We have to discuss, like in the Indian Constitution, municipalities and the panchayats, the administration of some of those subjects can be easily given. For example, take preschools, for example. I am taking an example. Preschools. Why should the running of preschools be done from Jaffna? Should the people, the local authorities in various places can do it? They'll be happy.
The constitution you are evolving around or trying to do is looking at, or this group, that group, this group, that group. Even talking about merger between North and East. We should come out of that, come out of this type of grouping people. Grouping people, please. Grouping people and trying to have a legislature implementing things. We should go away from that and to say that there are so many regions in the country. Have same policies for all those areas. That is what we have to move on so that a Sinhalese can come and live in Jaffna.
Please make your question, please.
Now my question is, why are you going into the groups instead of saying that different areas there are this is devolving powers equally everywhere the same. Don't talk about minorities or majorities or deprived and not deprived. So
Okay, got your point.
the law must be the same for all.
Answer.
Redefining the electoral system. That's my question. Redefining electoral system in Sri Lanka is going to happen under the new constitution, which is how equally, appropriately is going to be redefined from local and provincial and also the national level without affecting any minority communities over there, as well as in majority also. What I say is, it should be redefined with fair and justice. How far is going to happen, please?
4 decades or so, you are a Sinhalese Tamil. This is how we brought up as being differentiating. We should feel this new constitution, what you're trying to come up. Next 40 years' time, every Tamils living in the Sinhalese area, every Tamils who live in Tamils area, wherever, they should be proud to be Sri Lankans. That must be fulfilled by the constitution in the future. I think I'm sure lateral thinking has gone into place now.
Make the question.
Question is this: what is the constitution now? Do you think it's going to do that in order to feel the people of Sri Lanka in the future to feel they'll be proud to be Sri Lankan rather than a Tamil or Sinhalese? They can't have that, but they should be proud as a Sri Lankan. That is been depreciating in the last 4 decades.
I just want to know how far the government willing to take these provisions and implement, because even today TNA was saying they are not trusting the government, they are not going to do it.
Where is it?
How far? Pardon?
TNA has said that?
Yeah, member of TNA. Hello, they had a public meeting yesterday and they were saying that they won't believe the government. Yeah.
He's a member of TNA, member of TNA. His own opinion.
Yeah, he's a member of the team.
We want this groups. Well, this whole Sri Lankan identity is the idea. If we can all think as Sri Lankans, well and good. But you also have within the Sri Lankan polity. We have a dual identity. Every one of us have more than one identity, dual, sometimes three. You have numerically smaller groups with a particular cultural identity. And that is the reality. How has the majority community of Sri Lanka behaved? Have they shared power with the local, with the smaller groups? Who has dominated the Sri Lankan state? We, the Sinhalese, have dominated the Sri Lankan state. Did we share power with you? No. We did not share power with you. And that is the root of the conflict. This is finally all about sharing state power. Finally, state power. Who has state power in this country? I mean, in this country means Sri Lanka. Who has state power in Sri Lanka? State power is with the majority community. And that is what led to the conflict. So you need to, so while strengthening the Sri Lankan identity, how can you strengthen the Sri Lankan identity when numerically smaller communities feel that they are not part of the state, that they cannot take part in governing the country? When decisions are taken by the majority community, how can you do that? So when you have dispersed numerically smaller communities, it is the right, what is the demand? Demand is for equality. Equality in jobs, representation in parliament, all that. But the moment you have a numerically smaller group, living concentrated, I mean, take anywhere in the world. Give me an example of a concentrated community not asking for state power. Because the moment you are geographically concentrated, you are not satisfied only with equality. You want state power. You want to manage your own affairs. Supposing the history of Sri Lanka was different for various reasons, whether by migration or conquest. Supposing the Sinhalese were 30% only, and the rest of we were 70%, and we live in the south, 30%, and you, the majority Tamils of the Sri Lankan country, give us equality. Or we can write in Sinhala to your capital in Anuradhapura, you will get a reply in Sinhala, you also give us a few ministries, you get away, all that. But wouldn't we ask for, yes, thank you very much, but let us manage our affairs in the south. Wouldn't be a must. You would ask. You would ask. So it's finally a question of state power. So state power has to be shared. You have to find ways and means of sharing state power. I completely agree that we need to strengthen the Sri Lankan identity. But if a particular group if a particular group feels that he is left out of state power, how would he want to be part of the Sri Lankan identity? No, he would be. I mean, he'll probably cheer Sri Lanka at a cricket match, but would he feel truly Sri Lanka? So it's all nice to say. We the LSSP also used to think like that earlier. In 1972, when Dharmalingam got up and said in the Constituent Assembly, well, if you can't give us federalism, why don't you at least give us district councils? Why don't you do what you have promised in your election manifestos? Abolition of the kacheris and setting up of elected bodies at district level. What did we do? What did Sarath Muthu made the first speech and said federalism is not bad, but federalism can come only when there is socialism. We never looked at it. We all talked about it. No. And we thought, the LSSP and the Communist Party thought, Sinhala and Tamil being made official languages would solve all the problems. It would have it would certainly have made things better. But the issue of state power is finally naked state power that matters. So every community surely wants a share of state power. And when a community is geographically concentrated, that is how this whole issue comes up. But we are not going to give powers to Tamils. We are going to give powers to geographical areas. But don't forget that there are countries where power is given to particular communities, like in Belgium. Education, culture, and some of the subjects are given to community councils. Where a French person, wherever he is, a Dutch-speaking person, wherever he is, was part of a community. The schools are run by not by geographical units, but by community councils. So that we don't have to have that in Sri Lanka. So the unfortunate thing is, this issue is not looked at from the perspective of state power. I think we in the left also made this big mistake. But of course, 1983, 1984, the first state all-party conference, Colvin said, while he made this big mistake in 1972, while we all made this big mistake in 1972, Colvin said in 1984, now the only solution is state reform. Now it's had to be solved only through state reform. So this is the reality. Elections, elections. So if you provide for overall proportional representation, that would take care to a certain extent. But you can't. But if for example the Muslims in a particular area are voting for single-list candidates, what can you do? If this happens in for example in Harispattu in Kandy, Hamid won with single votes because he targeted the Sinhala Goigama community, and what was from there, he knew he was unable to get the so-called depressed caste votes, so he targeted the Sinhala community. How did Marika win in Kandy, in Colombo? He got a large number of Sinhala votes. So electoral system can only render possible the representation of various communities. It can't guarantee. If people are not voting, what can? So, but I get your point. So we have to make it possible for minorities to be represented. When minorities are voting for majority community candidates or majority parties, what can you do? Right? For example, the Muslims in Kandy are voting mainly for the UNP, not for the Muslim Congress, whether you like it or not. And that is why Hakim won once, of course, contesting separately. Today he can't win separately. My friend, I would like to see him winning in Kandy, coming on the SLMC ticket, but he can't. So that's about the Sri. I think that takes care of Sri Lankan identity. Thank you.
It is very important. This role of governor must be really fine. He's like a governor general now, rather than governor. And I would think that chief minister and the board of ministers must be made totally responsible for the administration. If that is done, most of the problems I know about the north and east, that will be resolved, because now it is useless. You can change any constitution so long as this role of governor is not really fine. And I think in India they have had number of administrative reform commissions. And I remember to have read...
Sarkar.
Yes.
Sarkar also recommended that the governor should not come from that particular province. And also, if it was a politician earlier, there must be a cooling off period of 2-3 years.
So
and the politician must be appointed as governor only after He has left politics
Some
and
sort of job description.
Yeah, but
if
you know,
it
Sri
could be
Lanka has-
specified in the constitution.
in Sri Lanka, the governor goes on in the May Day Belapali. Alavi Maulana used to lead the SLFP trade union thing at May Day, but he was a very good governor. Western province has been very lucky. Successive governors from Shalvananda down to the present guy has never interfered.
Western province had no problem, but
Western province are lucky.
unfortunately northern is that.
Yeah. I agree,
Background doesn't have a problem, but if the structure is, administrative structure is reformed in the constitution somewhere or other, then I am sure that things will happen better, managed better.
Any other?
There seems to be a lot of emphasis on these commissions that are going to be set up, which form for the sector balances to safeguard this thing. How do you ensure that these commissions are not politically biased, or they have the right people to right representation, or to deliver what is meant for?
Can I take a couple of more questions?
Dr. Vikramarana, relying on your discussion speech today, you have mentioned two matters. One is decentralizing powers to local authority. In one of his articles recently written by Mahinda Rajapaksa, he has been advocating for decentralizing powers to the local authority than the provincial councils. So you wouldn't have any problem in passing that bill, passing the particular section in the parliament. So we would encourage at least to empower the local authorities to manage our day-to-day matters. The second thing you have mentioned about the elections of the president, you suggested that if a president is indirectly elected, not directly elected by the people, there are advantages as well in order to maintain the parliamentary sovereignty. But I read in some of the news items in Sri Lankan media, they are proposing one president should be elected directly by the people, and there are two deputy presidents to be elected from each communities. I don't know whether it is an agenda or whether there's a proposal on this.
There are two more questions,
Okay.
Sri and Paul.
Dr. Ganapathy, I am, after hearing you today, I'm more encouraged and excited of the things you have get more light on that, because that will encourage me to spend my time and money more on the constitutional program. But one concern I have is that you are also sounding, at least on a reduced level, that certain things will be in consultation with the provincial council or chief minister. I request you to use your influence to reduce and have a clear-cut list when land powers or these things. Otherwise, we will have conflict in the future. We should not breed conflict. Why I am saying that is, in case if you have a chief minister who will not shake hands, in case if you have a chief minister who will not shake hands with the prime minister when he visits your province, if you have that type of chief minister, you are breeding, then you will have that problem. Because if the chief minister can't do something in consultation, then he won't even shake hands with the prime minister. So they are not clear to avoid this type of breeding conflict situation.
I did not get your question. What you say?
No, because you indicated in the process, like for example, land or lease or appointment of governors, if it will be done in consultation with the provincial council. Very, you are reducing much compared to the 13th amendment. But if it has to be in consultation with the provincial council, that means provincial council chief ministers, if they are in direct conflict, with the center, that's why I'm telling you, for example, there is a chief minister we have who will not shake hands with the prime minister. So that has to be reduced. If you have a clear cut, it will not happen.
And I want to tell you one thing on behalf of the European Council. we as a diaspora is not a threat. We are an asset to the country. We have two powers. One power and the other is an economic power. So that power and the team can help to rebuild our nation after 30 years of war. We are sick and tired of attending all these meetings. Now it's become part of our life. That's why we are here, but equality is less because there's no women here, not representing us. Okay, but one of the key things what I want to do, you mentioned about the identity, Sri Lankan identity, and you mentioned about the power, state power for all. Is that means that because we always cry for the state power, we want that. But then when you say, coming from the Sinhalese majority or from your political perspective, is that you see that there's a gap. The Sinhalese are not getting, or the Muslims are not getting. And now we want to see that we all get the same power in order to have a sustainable peace in that country. Equality. But because our reputation is damaged on an international stage, that's why the UN passed resolution. So where do we stand on the accountability, on the justice? How do we find a permanent solution? Because this opportunity comes on the constitutional reform is a key thing, not only for the Tamils, for the entire country. This is the golden opportunity. Because we are a minority as the TNA representing us as the leaders of the Tamils. We appreciate, we welcome that. But on the other side, we need people like you to motivate and then throw the message across to see whether we can find a permanent solution for the entire country. We missed it after 72, now we are coming in 2016. Right in between we had the votes, but what we want to see is how best you can play a part, how best your party can play a part, how best you feel personally, honestly, that 2016 can make a difference for all. Thank you.
The Commission for Good Governance is a must. The Commission for Good Governance.
What is related to the other earlier question on commissions. Now, why do we have to have commissions? It is simply because that take the public service. If you give the power of transfer to a particular official, there is chance of misuse. There is also the chance of politicians putting pressure on that particular official. That is why you have a public service commission, which is independent, or supposed to be independent, comprising of people who can stand up to pressure. That is the whole idea of having commissions. And rather than having one person dealing with bribery and corruption issues, you have an independent commission. But what is important is the appointment. Today, thanks to what we were able to achieve in the 19th Amendment, all the important commissions are appointed on the recommendation of the Constitutional Council. President cannot appoint anybody not recommended by the Constitutional Council. The composition of the Constitutional Council is a different matter. The Constitutional Council that we proposed to Parliament was to consist of just 3 politicians, the Speaker, Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, and 7 ordinary citizens. But under pressure from there, because we did not have a simple majority, 19th Amendment, let alone a simple majority, with a two-thirds majority, we did not have even a simple majority in Parliament. So we had to give in to people like Vasudeva Nanayakkar, who said the Constitutional Council must have a majority of MPs. What kind of left person is he? He the person who said the Constitutional Council must have a majority of members of Parliament. And we had to give in, finally, because we did not have a simple majority. Let alone two-thirds majority, finally. Veeravan, so all these guys said, no, Parliament, Constitutional Council must be dominated by MPs. We are elected people. And we are trying to solve the problem of elected people giving instructions to public officials. And he is saying, no, the Constitutional Council must be dominated by elected people. It comes to the same thing. But at least now it's a little better. I think the next round of reform we need to decrease the number of MPs in the Constitutional Council. and have more people from civil society. Regarding decentralization, I have no, I mean, my problem is, no, I think Rajapaksa wants decentralization but not devolution. What I stand for is under provincial councils, having devolved power. I encourage local authorities to be empowered under provincial power. So that's the difference. That is the difference. Regarding the presidential election, you know, this has been adverted to by Leibhardt, famous Dutch political scientist who had written much on this subject. He has warned that a president with little powers, actually, with few powers, should never be directly elected. He says in a crisis situation, he will claim, you Mr. Prime Minister, you are not directly elected, I am directly. And he says the danger is that in a crisis situation, he will convert the parliamentary form into effectively a semi-presidential form of government. I remember writing about it also in my podcast. I mean, one TNA MP may be skeptical. I'm sure there are others who are skeptical. But you have to go on the basis.
No, I'm just asking, how far you think the government will take the provisions you are explaining to us now? How far the government...
Or in short, what chances do these proposals have of success? I think a fairly good chance. Fairly good chance. Of course, the government needs to talk to party. I mean, there has to be a lot of backroom negotiation. Decisions are taken in the smoking rooms of parliament, as they say in London. So I think we need to be optimistic. If you are pessimistic, we will never go anywhere. Clear-cut division of powers. I am for clear-cut division. But about shaking hands, you know, about the appointment of, for example, the chief secretary, the president doesn't need to shake hands. But he only writes to the chief minister and says, what are your views? I am going to appoint so and so. What are your views? Do you agree or not? If there is no agreement, there can be consultation. But if there is completely, finally, there is no agreement at all, then somebody has to take the decision. I would suggest that in the case of the chief secretary, or rather governor, the appointment of the governor, chief secretary, chief minister should, ministers position he must be consulted. But if it is impossible, then probably you pass the matter to ask the Constitutional Council to advise the President. On the reconciliation, accountability, I think yes, accountability of course cannot be solved by the Constitution. But as far as reconciliation is concerned, if we can have a Constitution which is acceptable, at least, I mean, it may not be the best Constitution, but if it is acceptable in the present circumstances to the time especially, it will go a long way towards reconciliation. I want to, I should have said this earlier, I want to provoke you into a discussion on a very, an issue which may be very sensitive, which is very sensitive for both single and family people. This issue of the labor, unitary federal. Probably we can discuss it after lunch. In 2000, the 2000 bill does not use any phrase, unitary or federal. And we had no problem. But of course now it's not 2000, right? It's 10 years after Rajapaksa. And the large number of people who went before the Public Representation Committee from the South had said, I was told, we want unitary state. And they were asked, what do you mean by unitary state? And the large majority of those, almost everybody said, indivisible country. I had this opportunity, did I say this about my mother? No, yesterday. 1997, 1998, we were drafting the 2000 Constitution when my mother, who is a retired teacher, one day called me and said, what are you involved? Why are you involved? She had been reading the single papers. Why are you involved in the destruction of the unitary state? I was. But no, you are not going to. new constitution is not going to say it is unitary. Then I asked her, what do you mean, Amma, what do you mean by unitary state? No, this country can't be divided. So for the ordinary Sinhala person, unitary means, because it comes from the word eka. Ekiya is one. Ekiya is. In constitutional law terms, as the lawyers would know, unitary is unitary. But for ordinary people, unitary means indivisible. Now, people from the north and east who went before the Public Representations Committee and asked for federal, Tamil people, they asked for, we want a federal state. And they were asked, we want a federal. What do you mean by federal? We must be allowed to govern, take care of our land. So for most people in the north and east who want federal, what they say is, why don't you give us power to manage our own local affairs? For the people in the south who want unitary, they really mean an indivisible country. So there is this debate, cannot we use the word unitary to say, and now of course I discussed with the Tamil representatives, they said the danger in using the word unitary is that in the future the Supreme Court might say, sorry, unitary really means what it really means in constitutional law terms. So I was talking to a friend of mine who said, let us be, he said jokingly, let us be dishonest. Let us be dishonest and say, unitary means indivisible. I was joking, right? What he said was that one emerging proposal is to say Sri Lanka is an independent blah blah, indivisible and thus unitary state. I know many of you won't be happy with it. I've discussed with some of you earlier, to say that unitary here means indivisible and indivisible only. That is one way of it. I would not totally exclude that. I think what is important is the content. Then build up these other provisions, put all these other provisions in the constitution, which actually makes it quasi-federal, like in 2000. The 2000 draft was a quasi-federal arrangement, but it did not have labels. So if you have a second chamber, largely representative of the provinces, and takes care of the fears of the Tamil people that what is given today cannot be taken back tomorrow without their consent. We will have to innovate. We will have to come out with such innovations. I know most people are not, oh my God, how can you accept the word unitary? But if you make it clear, if you don't leave room for any other interpretation, I think we should consider that. These are some of the matters that I want to discuss with you. Hope we will discuss maybe after lunch. Lunch is ready.
ரெண்டு செய்திகளையும் சொன்ன பிறகு நாங்கள் அவர்கள் சாப்பாட்டுக்கு அரேஞ்ச் பண்ணுறதுக்கான
Dr. Jayapin, there is a question from from one of the members here. But he has asked this, I don't want to be on the camera, please ask this question. We live in multicultural society in UK, but in Sri Lanka, especially in Hambantottai and surrounding area, the politicians launching anti-Tamil propaganda to win. From that time, people in that area have that mindset. Do you think this new setup of state powers is going to make any changes in this area? This is Hambantottai.
Yeah, Rajapaksas are spreading communism. They will continue to do that. I think the Rajapaksas will resist any serious change.
Whether there will be any statutory control of that, that is what he wants to know.
Well, they are entitled, Rajapaksas are entitled to resist constitutional change, don't they? They're entitled to it. It's not Rajapaksas anymore, this is supposed to be a democratic, so they are entitled to resist it. But we need to take them on. Now, the difference during the CPK administration, there was this Sudinelu movement, all the people, which took the matter to the country, and she herself led the onslaught against the extremist forces. And we were able to, the opinion polls show that people who were going to vote would have voted largely for a new constitution. The government thinking appears to be that they are waiting for this Public Representations Committee report, which is due on Tuesday. And if the report, I don't know what the report is going to be, but if the report is favorable, I'm sure the report is going to be favorable. From all that I heard, there is, people want constitutional change, they are for reconciliation, they want better structure. And after that, I think the government must take this to the people. And rather than preventing, I mean, you can't, these are fundamental rights. You can't outlaw, you can outlaw racism, right? But you can't outlaw the right of any person, Rajapaksa or otherwise, to oppose constitutional change on the basis of, on other basis. You can't do it. So you must take them head on. You have to take them head on. In the few months, from initial statements made by people in the joint opposition, I think they did not oppose the resolution in the Assembly Parliament. The resolution for the adoption of a constitution, setting up of a constitutional assembly was passed without a division. They did not support it either. They did not openly support it. They said we are for constitutional change, but they quietly went down, except for Vasudeva and the Communist Party Gajanira, who stayed back. But they did not ask for a division. So the process is good. The process has been given legitimacy by unanimous acclaim. But as we go on, especially when this difficult issue of devolution comes, or rather more devolution, you can expect them to. Why I am saying is, let us be very practical. Let us be very practical about this whole thing. So don't fight over labels. Fight for the content. What is important is the content of the constitution, not the labels and what is important is that. And also this is also work in progress. This is not going to be the final constitutional reform. But if you fail this time, you won't get another one for another 20 years. So let us do what is possible today. Again, I want to end my discussion saying we are not going to get the best constitution for Sri Lanka. We will try to get the best constitution which is best in the circumstances possible. Thank you.
There was a question posed by Mr. Gopal, chairman of the Hindu Temple Federation, chairman of the Hindu Temple Federation of UK. Yes. And we are very concerned about North-East merger. If the government is implementing the 13th Amendment, why can't they merge North and East? We should not worry about Muslims, he says. And in Sri Lanka, major religions are Buddhism, Hinduism, Muslims and Christians. But major races are only Sinhalese and Tamils. Muslims are Tamils, so they are not a race. For example, Shahrukh Khan is an Indian, Imran Khan is a Pakistani. So this is what he says. And I think it's in fairness, Dr. Gambadi will respond to this, because whether it's a representative question or not, there are key concerns expressed in so many different levels of society. So that needs to be responded, I think.
I wonder what our Muslim friends have to say when somebody tells them, you are not Muslims, you are Tamils. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, thanks for. These are the things we need to come to a common ground. We work with also last also know that we worked last 14 years here. This is the ground. We're here. Muslims is a very good example in London. What happened? Your faith and your identity is your personal matter. When it comes to the common ground, there's a big area as a human humanity, we can work together, live together. So likewise, in Sri Lanka also, as one gentleman said right from the start, he was keep telling that, what do you call, why can't we think we all as a Sri Lankan?
Yes.
Meantime, I said, Doctor is approaching the constitutional amendments in practical way. This is the balance we are trying to strike. Basically, if I say practical way, the Muslim community is a bridge in Sri Lanka between Tamil brothers and the Buddhist brothers from thousands years. Because we can see the common ground as a humanity. We can live together. We have lived last 1,000 years. We can live another 1,000 years. Likewise, we keep our race and the faith and whatever our identity. We put it as identity. We keep us with our private matter. When it comes to the common ground, we think as we all are human, and we are human race, one race.
I know you are a president council, I am only an honorary council. I can assist the constitutional legal status. Muslims have a constitutional status as one of the races even in our old constituency. Old constitution which we are trying to amend. Muslims, Burghers and even Indian Tamils have a constitutional status. Our Sri Lankan constitution have a status. They have a constitutional status in Muslims because in the passport application we have all come with a Sri Lankan passport. No, even if we have come to this country with a Sri Lankan passport, in the passport application it asks what is your ethnicity. We have to say you are Tamil, Indian Tamil. Not anymore, I don't know. I come to this country.
It was the past in application. I have filled in my application.
Recently?
Oh, yeah, I was thinking about 20 years back.
The birth certificate does not give, now the birth certificate does not give the race. But, I mean, our friend who made the question may regard Muslims as Tamils. But the question is whether Muslims regard themselves as Tamils.
No, not really. That is just we need to understand.
So this is the problem, right? So wait, please.
Right, let me explain. This is what I'm telling you. This is not me.
No, we don't have to go into the question. We don't have to go into the question whether Muslims are Tamils. But the question we have to answer is whether the Muslims regard themselves as Tamils, whether correct or not. So they have a different identity.
Exactly.
Whatever, whether we like it or not, they have a different identity. You can go on debating whether the Muslims are Tamils or not, but the fact is that they have a separate identity. In fact, their identity has changed over the years. Earlier, their identity was as Moors. Now they have changed their identity to Muslims. When the census is taken and published is Moors, but their real identity, the present identity is as Muslims. So what can you do about it? That's their choice. That's their choice. Right? So about the on the legal issue, on the constitutional issue, the 13th Amendment does not say anything about the Northeast merger. No. The 13th Amendment only says that Parliament may by law make provision, I can't remember the exact words, for two provinces to come together with a single provincial council, with a single chief minister and a single board of ministers. That's all what it says. So the 13th Amendment permits mergers. Parliament shall make by law, so you have to make a law. The Provincial Councils Act provides that the President may make order merging two or more provinces. In the case of the Northeast, there is a specific provision that a referendum shall be held but within 1 year. Now, foolishly, J.R. Jayawardena, that is what gave Sarath Silva the handle. Without even the first referendum could not have been held within the first year. So ideally the constitution could have been, not the constitution, the Provincial Council Act could have been amended to extend that period. Without doing that, he used the emergency regulations to do that. And that was unconstitutional. Sarath Silva used that as a handle. So my position is, it is a matter for the people of any provinces to decide on a merger. So Parliament can make law, but I of course insist that the consent of the people should be obtained. So if the people of the Eastern Province do want to merge, well, let them, why not? How can you stop? That is my position. But you can't impose a merger on a particular province. The people must agree.
You want to say something?
Whether they agree or not in Sri Lanka, they say they are Muslims. Finally, information and the most originally they are from Indonesia. People who came there as Muslims, they are the only ones who are Muslims. People who convert them as Islam from Hinduism or whatever it is, they are Tamils. According to Home Office record in this country, they are Muslims. We can't go and say, my religion is Islam, my mother tongue is Islam as well.
But the problem is that they now assert a different identity. How can you impose on them their identity? No, sorry, I'm sorry, I take exception, right? You cannot, I'm sorry, comrade. How can you impose on them a particular identity when they say, no, ours is different?
Raise your hands there.
Christian wants for single is clear cannot he is a single. He can be a Christian or Buddhist, but he is a single.
Sorry?
A single can be a Christian or Buddhist or Hindu. There are single Christians. There are plenty. They don't have any other identity. They are single.
Yeah, but their primary identity is Sinhalese.
Yeah.
They have a secondary identity, Sinhalese Buddhist or Sinhalese Christian. But here you have, all this is disputed. This is what you say, comrade, but they don't agree. They say, so how can you, this is not a matter of history. This is not a matter of history, there is a matter of identity.
For the benefit of the constitutional discussion, we had to move away from this question.
Yes. I think to be sorry to interrupt, and I think to be fair, this question is asked primarily in the context of merger. Northeast merger is something that is a political demand, which I think Dr. Jayapathy has responded to that in a speech. All what is possible, it looks like it appears to be possible is, it will not go below the 13th Amendment. What is in the 13th Amendment? On the question of merger. What is in the 13th Amendment is any two provinces can opt to.
No. It says Parliament may by law provide for two provinces to come together. I can't remember the exact wording, with and acting as one province, one unit, one board of ministers, one chief minister. So that is what is provided. So law has to.
So those who are interested in merger, in my point of view, they need to have a serious dialogue with the Muslims in the East and throughout the country. The answer lies there. That we need to, those who are seriously interested in the merger, or whether we are going to progress towards merger, there is a need for serious dialogue. And for the time being, as it is now, this is going to be 13th Amendment, maybe a plus. Yes, that is what it looks like. The next, I think that we'll move on from that, and if there are any more questions, we'll come back to that. Now I call upon the TNA representative, Mr. Ratna Singh, actress, will you come here?
First of all, I thank the NRPS to convene this meeting, and also had invited Dr. Jayanpathy, who is involved in the making of the constitution, new constitution. And we have heard from the horse's mouth, and he has repeated several times, we can only make the best constitution under the circumstances. That is a very important message he has given. And at the same time, Mr. Jayanpathy made a statement that the President has stated that even without the TNA, we can make the constitution.
We cannot. We should not.
We should not. No. Even if we can make, we should not do it without the support of the TNA.
What he said is, what is the point in making
a constitution without the support of the TNA? Now the question lies, where do the TNA stands? Because a lot of things have been circulating among the diaspora. The whole theories of right to self-determination, all sort of theoretical things are going. And at the last meeting I said that we should concentrate not on the name tag but on the substance. I think Dr. Jayanpathy also has explained it thoroughly that what we need is a full devolution and the safeguard for it. This message was thankful to the NRTS to call various people from the various organizations from the diaspora and have made them understand what is the reality at this junction. So I would request all people who have been here to convey this message to their respective organizations. What is our aspirations? There is going to be a gap between the aspirations and what is achievable. So that the gap has to be narrowed, but it will not be narrowed fully. So that message should be given, and we, the Tamils, must say that we must not say that we should get 100 or 0. There are a group of extreme in both sides, Sinhalese as well as Tamils, thinking that we should get 100 or forget the total. That notion should be dispelled, and at these circumstances, whatever possible, we should get it. And as he said, if we do not get the best constitution under the present circumstances, we will not get it during our lifetime. So this message has to be conveyed, and also I request the NRTS to widen this circle and convey, and they should create a website to see these messages are conveyed to the entire diaspora. And I would say that it's a brainwash or anything that people have been under false notion that things, because the TNA is also responsible for forming this government, TNA can do miracles. TNA cannot do miracles because of the SLMP opposition element. So whatever possible, the intellectuals in the steering committee are working, and we will get whatever possible, and we should try to narrow down the gap between the aspirations and the achievable. And for that, we should cooperate with the steering committee as much as possible and see that it's done. So please convey these messages to your respective organizations, and also I request the NRTS to widen the circle and create a website to pass these messages. Thank you.
I want to call upon Mr. Rajanam to say a few words. Mr. Rajanam doesn't need any introduction. He is one of the senior most respectable citizens here to come. You can stand here. was editor of Tamil Times. He was a serious opinion editor amongst the last. He has always been consistent, progressive.
Let him talk.
Let it go.
Anyway, I am not from here prepared to make a speech. So I have a considered the prospect of speech. You are imposing on me a duty which I don't want to perform. Anyway, I have been at meetings like this for nearly 25-30 years. Tenor wanted those type of discussions are markedly different from the tenor and tone of the speeches made today. Some of the views that have been expressed in regard to devolution and merger could not have been made even about 4 or 5 years ago in meetings like this. What appeared to be the case was there was an entrenched decision on the part of the government to achieve a separate state or nothing less than. But the separate state ideology was there. Today, what I see and hear is nobody is advocating a separate state. That is the message I get from this speeches and reaction. In regard to devolution, we lost one good chance in 2000, as the speaker pointed out. That was a good opportunity which we could have made to be a practical proposal for a settlement. But unfortunately, the UNP and then, if I am right, even the TUL proposed that proposal in Parliament, and UNP set fire to the draft constitution, and that was the end of that. Now it is 15 years, we have come back to devolution again. I hope and wish Jayapathy Vikramaratne has spoken his heart out. With the honest belief that what he suggests are practicable and viable and reasonable. I personally consider those proposals as welcome. There may be certain flaws in the process. Whether the principles of constitutionalism are being observed in the passage of matters before Parliament, that may be a questionable aspect. Otherwise, I welcome the proposals, and I think we should provide all the support the proposal needs. And this is the second trip Jayapathy has made, and he deserves our thanks. Thank you very much.
Noteworthy to mention that non-President Travels for Sri Lanka has taken a right track on dealing with this constitution making. When I read the interview that was been in Hindu with Mr. T. Ramakrishnan, Dr. Jayapathy Vikramaratne made very positive remarks about the constitution, and I felt that the constitution making is in safer hands. I just make a very brief comment about the issue of the upcountry Tamils, the non-territory ethnic minorities. Wider representations have been made. About 70 odd delegations made with the constitution body, and the first claim is that to recognize them as a national minority in Sri Lanka. The first time, apart from the Sri Lankan Tamils, I mean, they were getting away, they want a separate state, whereas the upcountry Tamils just got the Frenchman rights, and they want to participate in the mainstream politics. Why the Sri Lankan Tamils are going away from the mainstream politics of Sri Lankan politics.
the upcountry Tamils, the first time they are exercising their franchise rights, and they want to join, and they want the Sri Lankan main politic to recognize their participation and their national status. So with regard to that, I just want to know what legal safeguards can be given in their areas to protect their rights. That would be my main concern. Thank you.
I think the citizenship issue, of course, is by and large almost totally resolved. I don't think there are any hill country Tamils who are still stateless. Even the few Chinese who were resident in Sri Lanka without citizenship were given citizenship. So that is almost over. Then as far as recognition is concerned, you know, it is the 17th Amendment. Although it did not say specifically, the 17th Amendment provided for the nomination of 3 persons to represent the minorities. They used the word minorities. And it was earlier 2, meaning the Tamils and the Muslims. Then I remember very well Yogarajan said, got up and said in Parliament, and no, we also want recognition. So although hill country Tamils were not specifically named and mentioned, they increased the number to 11 to accommodate them. So that was the first time implicitly they were recognized as a separate. But of course in the census also they are separately enumerated, but they are called Indian Tamils. Problem is that in people of that community who live in Vaunia and other areas, if they are asked, they will say we are Tamils. I don't think the enumerator bothers to ask them whether they are hill country Tamils or Tamils. Say who are you are Tamil, who say you are Tamil. So I think the real percentage of hill country Tamils is higher than the actual percentage reflected in the census. With regard to your question, they will get representation in the in the 4 provinces. Western, maybe they will. For example, Mano Ganesh will be there. Sabaragamu, they will get. They've always got 1 or 2 from Kebo, Central Province and Goa. But they have been asking for a cultural council, like thing, right? But I think they call it a Hill Country Community Council, consisting of all the MPs from that community, all the provincial councillors from that community, and maybe another 5 appointed by the president. And then they be given a block grant and given some powers relating to their schools, culture and various things. That is, I think that is a proposal that needs to be is worthy of consideration. I will certainly support it. What the response will be from the main parties, I don't know. But I think that's something that you could do. I mean, this is like again in Belgium, in a different way, of course, where they have certain powers. They are not asking for legislative power. They are only asking for a block grant, so that they could decide where the money can go. Like we MPs getting we get this decentralized budget. I can decide where to use it. So like that, if the council, Indian Hill Country Community Council is set up and given a block grant, I think they will be very happy.
Constitution, or are you contemplating any provision to safeguard the minorities in the other provinces from being, there will be minority communities in other provinces? Would there be special safeguards addressed to them to look after the rights of?
Yeah, as I said in my earlier speech, or rather when I was answering one of the questions, you have this question of numerically smaller communities including the Sinhalese in the Vaunia. So one way of doing it is empowering the local authorities, giving local authorities certain powers under the provincial councils. Of course, it must be made clear that they come under the provincial council. Otherwise, the central government will start dealing with them direct. That's one way of doing it, giving them more power. So, because there are localized minorities everywhere, where will I, as I said, I
think I can call Narada Kumar to say a few words, because Narada Kumar has been very active for so long years here, and he has been dealing with these issues and really to so much information regarding his work. So I would like to give his opinion and the way forward.
So I think it's an important initiative. I can remember we have been talking about the need for constitutional reform or change 15 years ago. But no one talked about constitution. The word constitution did not appear in any of the diaspora. But today, that's what I was telling Mumbai, that like season, because in Sri Lanka we always follow a season. We have a human rights season, a war crime season, and genocide season. But now it is a season of
Global warming is the meeting except NRDS.
But it is good. Not only here, even there are meetings that have been held in East End. Now everybody is talking about constitution. So at least it has given some impetus for people to look at constitution as a serious issue and to deal with that. And we are also pleased to know that there are about, somebody was saying, over 5,000 proposals, recommendations, which is a very important sign. At the same time, I think Dianathan was talking about plantation. There is also a serious change taking place in the plantation sector itself. Because earlier they were considered as upcountry Tamils, hill country Tamils. Then now they are discussing among themselves as to how they must term themselves. Because as time went on, when they got the citizenship status, they have been brought under the category of Ceylon Tamils. No, Indian Tamils, and most of the people who are now, when you look at the statistics, the number of people as classified as Indian Tamils are dropping.
Yeah, because they when they ask, that's what I said earlier.
Yes.
When they ask, they say we are Tamils.
Exactly. So now, but that is a serious issue discussed in the upcountry sector, which also has brought this constitutional reform has brought that aspect as well. So overall, I think as even last meeting we were discussing, we were saying this is not an end constitution, because as I said in Nepal there are 10 or 15 times the constitution has been changed. So it is a process, but this process has to be enhanced, and I am sure time has come. People will look into it.
Dr. Vikramaretta, so far we have been discussing various factors in making constitution. We have failed to consider the important factor, Sri Lankan military. What the role they will play in making the constitution and implementing the constitution, or in the process of...
They won't have a role in the process. Of course, unless military people who are unhappy with the present government get together with the Rajapaksas and carve out for themselves a role. There won't be a role.
There was mention about UNP. I'm not speaking about UNP or any party, but there was a mention that Tanaka proposal was thrown away or actually burnt and this thing. But I thought that one of the reasons was that because by that proposal, there was a conception or a perception that Chandra was trying to extend the power beyond her term. Was not the reason for the reason?
So what happened was, Chandrika had been just elected in late 1999, re-elected, and we were having this process, and the question, and the constitution provides for the complete abolition of the executive presidency. But then what do you do with the current president who has been elected by the people for a... of course, my position was that she should give up the executive presidency as soon as possible. Everybody agreed that there should be a transition. Then I spoke to the minister in charge, who was GLP secretary. I remember it was a Saturday, 3 o'clock. Went to Visumpaya, where I stayed, got an appointment and went there. I was his consultant. And he said, Jampati, yes, any special matter? I said, this issue of the transitional provision of Chandrika's term. I told him, the UNP is not going to buy this. I used the same, I very well remember. The UNP is not going, what I meant was the UNP is not going to wait for another 6 years, having changed the constitution for Chandrika to continue as executive president. I said the UNP is not going to buy it. GL was very reluctant to take up this issue with Chandrika. And nobody was prepared to say, bell the cat and say, you must leave early. Then I spoke to the left leaders. And I'm sorry to say that both the LSSP and the CP Communist Party leaders thought, they also thought so. If I remember one of the leaders, with the name, no, I mean one of the LSSP CP leaders told the president, Madam, you have a mandate, you have been elected second time. I mean, sure it's going to be not going to buy that, right? So then, for the moment, in the bill we put 6 years that she can continue. But we knew it had to be draft set. Then we discussed it with the UN. I was there. I was secretary of the talks. I had the minutes. Discussed it and she said, I am prepared to go early. What is the period? What is the period? Then she said, I don't want to take part in that discussion. You discuss it and come. So, by that time, all the other provisions are agreed upon. And Chandrika and Rahil had made that famous statement on TV. Say that we have created history, we have now come to an understanding about the new constitution, there are only a few matters to be sorted out. And then the meeting was fixed within the PA to discuss this transitional period. And that day, Chandrika said, now already 8 months have gone, 7 months or 8 months have gone. Let's agree on a shorter period. Then it was decided that we would propose to the UNP that it would be 3 years. But the UNP insisted that it would come down to 2 years. By that time, 8 months had already gone. So another 1 year and 4 months. And then they fixed a date. I have written about this in my book, which Charles has. There are some books for sale as well. Right? I've written about it, right? And then so the meeting was fixed to discuss the transition period. That day, it was Mr. Karu Jayasuriya who came to the meeting on behalf of the UN. Chandrika was in Kandy meeting the Mahanayakas with the new drafts. And Chandrika got late to come. She was held up. She telephoned Ratnasri Vikramanayake. I was there when she got the call. And said she wants to start. She wants us to start. Helicopter getting delayed because she had not been Mahanayakas. So let's start, and we wanted to discuss this interim provision. Then Karu Jayasuriya, we were having, I remember it very well, right? We were having snacks, right? Eating patties, waiting for the tea to come. As Ratnasri started the meeting, Karu Jayasuriya collected the file and got up and said, I'm sorry, the UNP has now thinks that the proposal should be placed before the Mahasangha and walked out. If they had stayed back and discussed that issue, the period could have been reduced to 2 years. And then thereafter, what the mistake that is the UNP's mistake. The big mistake we made was Then some of the ministers said, no, there are 16 guys who will, from the UNP, who are going to cross over and vote for the bill. So we don't have to worry about it, so let us go with 6 years. That was another foolish thing. One of the ministers, I don't want to name, ministers told me, Machan, he said, Machan, so and so is coming, so and so, he was giving the names. I knew, if he was telling me like that, the whole country would have known, right? So Ravi Karunanayak, who was smarter, took all those 16 people and went to Singapore. And the whole thing crashed. So there's a big mistake on both sides. But what is the lesson from this? That you should, and why did, I think the UNP sabotaged it, but why did they sabotage it? It was too close to the general election. We had only 3 weeks for dissolution. UNP at that stage, if the constitution went through, that would have given Chandrika a big advantage at the next election, and UNP did not naturally won. The lesson that we have to learn is never keep a constitution, never present a constitution close to an election. Do it as early as possible. Now, 2 years back, we were discussing, I was talking to Chandrika about this. Then he said, I'll tell you something which you don't know. It is correct that I made the call. But do you know that in the same call, I told Ratnasiri, agree even to 1 year. That means another 4 months. I never knew this. And she said, the following morning I called up Karu Jayasuriya and told him, I'm prepared to reduce it to 1 year. So then, but I wanted to double check that. I asked Karu Jayasuriya, sir, did this happen? He said this. The following day she called me and said, I'm prepared to bring it down to 1 year. Very unfortunate that this happened. This again shows, do it now. Don't wait for the 6th. God said, don't wait till the last year in Parliament to pass a constitution. Because other factors come into play. I mean, one may say that the UNP was opportunist. The UNP will say, why should we help the opposition party to get re-elected? I mean, you can, the game will go on, but the lesson to be learned is do it as soon as possible.
Right, Dr. Bala, desperate asked.
Thank you, Doctor. Just want to ask you a few things. First of all, this whatever the constitution we are proposing, this is really address the grievances of the people concerned. We have gone through 30 years of war, and we have so much memories of the war and all the losses and devastations caused. And they have expectations, maybe genuine or perceived, their expectations, whether this will really address those grievances in such a way that will satisfy the people. We are just talking about TNA, just not the TNA, so the people who are represented by the TNA. I have my element of doubt on that. In that regard itself, I can say you wrote the question about unitary and the federal is an important question for the Sinhalese and for the Tamils as well. Sinhalese want unitary, as we have explained clearly, but again you have mentioned it in a nice way as well. In the unitary, Sinhalese people are expecting that country should not be divided by any means, and federal means they want some sovereign rights to look after their own affairs. That's about it. And these two guarantees have to be given in such explicit manner in the constitution to satisfy the both sides. And that's what I think the major part of this constitution, thrust of the constitution. Otherwise, there is no point in making it. You can do everything else. That is what I believe is lacking in whatever you have said so far. So I would emphasize to give more thoughts on that to see whether any other way. You said for unitary state, put whatever it says, if you want to separate, they can separate. You can't stop it. So in the constitution, you can add anything to stop it. Similarly, for the sovereign rights of this provincial council, that powers won't be taken away, have been guaranteed in such a solid manner that will satisfy the people. That is number one issue. If that is all done, then it's come to the second issue, is implementation. Whatever you can write in the constitution, it doesn't matter. And then it's all depending on implementation. For an example, you have that in the language implementation now. For language implementation, we have everything is in place in constitution. In practicals, it's not. It's not happening at all. I know, I have very good experience of that in myself, and it's very, very sad. It can be done. You know, in Britain now, this European nation, we are providing such a big facilities for so many languages. In my hospital, in 10 languages, welcome to hospital, everybody. And in the 10 languages, it says, you will come here, we will provide the translator. You know, I have no rights. If I see a patient who is a Lithuanian, and if I don't speak to him properly, and he can accuse me. He is something I don't understand. I am liable for it. So I had to bring in the interpreter to make sure that, you know, he understood, I understood, everything is there. So why can't we do this kind of thing to satisfy just two communities which has been living there thousands of years together? I think it can be done if the bill is lacking. So that if we can start doing that in language, then we know that resolve will come in place to implement the constitution. That is number 2. Number 3 is again the building the trust. Again, that is what lacking in our societies. Building the trust. It is not there since the end of the war. Everybody thought Mahinda will do it, no, he will do it, and this government, there's a big hope. This government going to give doing everything. Then it started with the prisoners list, that list, this list, that arrest, this arrest, and it is slowly going down and down. The trust is going down to the bottom levels. Okay, now so many arrests are happening now in the country as well. You know, that is again creating chaos as well. So how we are, and about the military, the people asking you to remove the military, people asking for to land to give back, and now these 65,000 houses creating chaos as well. So you know that building trust is a fundamental issue, flows there. So that flows had to be fixed. With these 3 principles in place only, this constitution will work.
I agree. The second one, especially the second one on the language issue. We got everything in place, as you said, 13th Amendment. Not only the 13th Amendment, the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, which brought in new language rights. And very little has been implemented. Something has been done. I think Mano Ganesh, and before that Vasudev also tried his best. Some certain things were done, but woefully inadequate. Building up trust, yes, I think we will have to. Unfortunately, you know, there are people. There are so many people who don't look at this whole question on that basis, and therefore release of land, all that has been delayed. The military guys, you know, they are coming out with various excuses. But it is happening, but not at the pace that we would like to see. But on the first question, I want to say you used the word sovereign. The moment you say sovereign rights, then all these issues of federalism and self-determination, and the moment you say sovereign rights of the provinces, people of the provinces.
So I'm not trying to explain to you what
so
they mean.
you have to be very careful.
Because definition by the unity and whatever.
Be very careful. So no, okay. So I won't get involved in that. So best thing is, yes, what is needed is to provide for meaningful devolution, which gives a fair share of state power to all the communities. I think it has to be looked at from share state power angle. I want to say, at one meeting in one conference, one workshop conducted by the Constitution Affairs Ministry, I'm just trying to show how some people look at this thing, right? One of our lawyer friends, Gaston, was very singular to this extremist, very vociferous law President's Council said, what problems do the Tamils have? What problems do they have? We go in the same bus, we share the same teapot. So what more? What problem? So I got up and said, I said that is the problem. You are prepared to share the teapot, but you are not prepared to share state power. That is the crux of the thing. And he did not count.
I think this has been a very useful meeting. Everyone, many of you would like to talk, and we cannot go on. We have to bring this meeting to an end now because it was meant to be at 3 o'clock. Now it is 20 minutes past 3. And I call Ramraj, he is one of the founder members, he is one of the, he engineered this organization and the today's event as well. Call to give a vote of thanks.
அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். முதலாக கடுமையான வேலைப்பளுக்கு மத்தியிலும் எர்நாடிஎஸ்களின் அழைப்பை ஏற்று இங்கே வருகை தந்த டாக்டர் ஜெயம்பதி விக்ரமன் அவர்களுக்கு எர்நாடி சார்பிலும் புலம்பெயர்ந்த தமிழர் சார்பிலும் நான் நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். இந்த நிகழ்வை இவ்வளவு வெற்றிகரமாக கொண்டு செல்வதற்கு எப்பொழுதுமே நிதி ஒரு பிரச்சனை என்று உங்கள் எல்லோருக்குமே தெரியும். அந்த வகையிலே எங்களுக்கு 2 முக்கியமான உறுப்பினர்கள் அந்த நிதியை அன்பளிப்பு செய்தார்கள். முதலாவதாக எக்ஸிடென்ட் கேட்டசி அதன் உரிமையாளர் பத்மநாதன் அவர்களுக்கும், இந்த உணவகத்தை உண்மையிலே இது இப்பொழுது இன்றைக்கு திறக்க வேண்டிய உணவகம் அல்ல, இது கடந்த 3 மாத காலமாக இங்கே பல்வேறு வேலைகள் செய்து நடைபெற்றுக் கொண்டிருக்கிறது. எங்களுக்காக மிகவும் சிரமத்துக்கு மத்தியிலே இந்த உணவகத்தை தந்து மிக அருமையான சாப்பாடை தந்த அதன் உரிமையாளர் குணாளன் அவர்களுக்கும் அவர்களுக்கு ஒத்துழைப்பு வழங்கிய அதன் ஊழியர்களுக்கும் நான் நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். இந்த தகவல்களை வெளியே கொண்டு செல்ல வேண்டிய ஒரு தேவை முக்கியமாக எல்லோருக்கும் இருக்கின்றது. இங்கே நாங்கள் பல்வேறு தரப்பினர் சேர்ந்திருந்தாலும் தகவல் உலகமெங்கும் செல்லும் பொழுதுதான் அதனுடைய வெற்றி நிச்சயமாக எங்களை வந்து அடையும். அந்த வகையிலே அதில் முக்கியமாக பங்கெடுத்திருக்கின்ற தேசம் இணையதள உரிமையாளர் ஜெயபாலன் அவர்களுக்கும், தமிழ் ரீவ்ஸ் உரிமையாளர் சோதலிங்கம் அவர்களுக்கும், பிபிசியின் செய்தியாளர் திரு சீவகன் அவர்களுக்கும், அத்தோடு இங்கே வரைய தந்த சிவா அவர்களுக்கும், அதோட ஐபிசி அவர்கள் ஐபிசி நிறுவனம் இன்று ஆங்கிலத்திலே குறிப்பாக மோதன் 1 மணி காலத்துக்கு மேல் அவருடைய தகவல்களை பதிவு செய்திருக்கின்றது. அது மட்டுமல்லாமல் பிபிசியில் நாளை ஆங்கிலத்திலும் தமிழிலும் இவருடைய செய்திகள் ஒளிபரப்பாக்கியிருக்கின்றது. அவர்களுக்கும் நான் நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். பல்வேறு அமைப்புகள் இங்கே இருந்த பொழுதும் நாங்கள் தெரிவு செய்து அழைத்து பொழுது மனங்குவால் இங்கே வந்து கலந்து கொண்டு தங்களுடைய கருத்துக்களை முன்வைத்ததும் மட்டுமல்லாமல் பல்வேறு அரசியல் முரண்பாடுகள் இருந்தாலும் கூட அவற்றையெல்லாம் ஒரு பக்கம் தள்ளி வைத்துவிட்டு இது இலங்கையிலே நடைபெறுகின்ற இந்த அரசியல் அமைப்பு சீர்திருத்தம் முக்கியமான விடயம். அங்கே வாழ்கின்ற தமிழ் பேசும் மக்களுடைய நிலைமை தொடர்பாக எங்களுடைய கருத்துக்களை முன்வைக்க வேண்டும் என்ற ஆவலோடு வருகை தந்த அந்த அமைப்பில் உள்ள அனைவருக்கும் நான் நன்றியையும் வாழ்த்துக்களையும் தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கின்றேன். அது மட்டுமில்லாமல் இன்று மிகவும் அருமையான ஒரு காலநிலை, குடும்பத்துடன் இருந்து பல்வேறு இடங்களுக்கு சென்று இந்த காலநிலையை அனுபவித்திருக்கின்றோம். கடைக்கு சென்றிருக்கலாம். அதனால் அவற்றையெல்லாம் விட்டு அங்கே எங்கள் மக்கள் பல்வேறு இன்னல்களுக்கு உள்ளாக்கப்பட்டிருக்கிறார்கள். எங்களுக்கு ஒரு முக்கியமான சந்தர்ப்பம் கிடைத்திருக்கின்றது. அந்த சந்தர்ப்பத்தில் கையில் வைத்திருக்கின்ற டாக்டர் ஜெயமதி அவர்கள் அவர் சிறப்புரை ஆட்டுகிறார் என்கின்ற பொழுது தங்களுடைய வேலை பொழுவெல்லாம் ஒதுக்கிவிட்டு இங்கே வருகை தந்து எங்களுக்கு ஆதரவளித்த அவர்களுக்கும் எங்களுடைய மனமார்ந்த நன்றிகள். அத்தோடு எங்களுக்கு எப்பொழுதுமே நிதி பிரச்சனை என்பது உங்களுக்கு அனைவருக்கும் தெரியும். தங்களால் இயன்ற நிதியை தந்து இன்னும் தர இருக்கின்ற நிதி தருகின்ற உங்களுக்கும் எங்களுடைய அன்பான நன்றி. இறுதியாக உண்மையிலேயே நாங்கள் இந்த கூட்டத்தை தொடர்ந்து நடத்த வேண்டிய தேவை இருக்கின்றது. இன்னும் நாங்கள் உண்மையிலே ஆட்களை திட்டமிட்டு தான் அழைத்தோம். எல்லாத்தையும் நாங்கள் அழைக்கவில்லை, குறிப்பிட்ட அமைப்புகளை மட்டும் அழைத்தோம். அவர்கள் வந்திருக்கின்றார்கள். தொடர்ந்து நாங்கள் இந்த கூட்டத்தை இன்னும் பல்வேறு அமைப்புகளை உள்வாங்குவதற்கு தயாராக இருக்கின்றோம். அல்லது நாங்கள் அவர்கள் கலந்து கொண்டு ஒன்றிணைந்து கருத்துக்களை வழங்க தயாரிக்கின்றோம். அவர்களை உற்சாகப்படுத்த வேண்டும், உங்கள் கருத்துக்கள் அவர்களுக்கு சென்றடைய வேண்டும் என்று கூறிக்கொண்டு அதை நீங்கள் சிறப்புடன் செய்வீர்கள் என்று கூறிக்கொண்டு அதற்கான ஒத்துழைப்பை வழங்க வேண்டும் என்று கேட்டுக்கொண்டு இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியை இவ்வளவு சிறப்பாக நடத்துவதற்கு உண்மையிலே நாங்கள் ஒரு ஆலோசனை குழுவை நிறுவியிருந்தோம். அந்த குழுவினர் நாங்கள் அடிக்கடி சந்திக்காவிட்டாலும் தொலைபேசி ஊடாக மின்னஞ்சல் ஊடாக தங்கள் கருத்துக்களை தெரிவித்து ஒரு ஆரோக்கியமான ஒரு அறிக்கையை இன்று அவர் கையில் கொடுப்பதற்கு ஒத்துழைப்பை வழங்கிய அனைத்து உறுப்பினர்களுக்கும் நான் நன்றியையும் வாழ்த்தையும் தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். அது மட்டுமல்ல, இந்த என்ஆர்டியில் 6 உறுப்பினர்கள் ஒரு ஆரம்பத்திலே அதை உருவாக்கியிருந்தோம். அந்த 6 உறுப்பினர்களும் தங்களுடைய பங்கை மிக செவ்வனவே செய்திருக்கின்றார்கள். அவர்களுக்கும் நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொண்டு